It's time to accelerate. Hi, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Join me as I host conversations with the leading experts in sales, marketing, sales automation, sales process, leadership, management, training, coaching, any resource that I believe to help you accelerate the growth of your sales, your business, and most importantly, you.
Hello, and welcome to Accelerate. Here's another episode of Frontline Friday with my special guest, Bridget Gleason. Bridget, how are you today?
Andy, I'm super today. What about you?
Good. Not too bad at all, as a matter of fact. So, looking forward to talking.
Good. And what today, Andy, our topic for today?
We're going to talk about this whole topic that's being raised time and time again about, is the business-to-business salesperson, sales professional, endangered? Is this an endangered species? And certainly there's some research that's been put forth about that we're going to see this pretty significant shrinkage among the ranks of B2B salespeople over the next 5 years. And I don't believe that's true. And we're going to talk about why I don't believe that's true. But what sales professionals need to do to ensure that it doesn't become true, at least for them personally.
Yeah, we've been hearing about this for years that, automation in the sales arena and some of the tools and the internet and being able to find and buy and get questions answered online is going to eliminate the need for salespeople. And I'm with you. I don't believe that's true. I think that the skills required have changed, but the need for the fact that salespeople will go away, or that as a fact, I don't believe.
Yeah, and I think, I think there's some trends emerging, and I get this not just from me personally thinking it, but conversations I've had with. Well, obviously, I've had conversations with hundreds of people on the show, but people specifically sort of focused on this topic. And a lot of this conversation about sales professionals going away, the need for B2B sales professionals going away, really been driven by the tech business, right? Out in Silicon Valley, where there's been this huge emphasis on sales technology, sales automation, process. And according to people that I'm talking with, there's actually now sort of a little bit of a pushback happening in coming from those same companies that are driving the bleeding edge, saying, yeah, this is great to a point, but once we reach a certain point where we really need to engage with our prospects beyond the initial point of interest, where we're actually working the deal, that perhaps the person's becoming more important than we thought they were in making this happen. And this has certainly been my belief, is that's the point where the sales rep, if you can continue to add value to your prospect, it's always going to be a role for you.
Yeah, as you were talking, Andy, I think about one of the things that I saw at Sumo Logic with the team is we would implement various technologies. I'll take one. It's email sequencing. So we use Outreach, which is a fantastic tool that helps set up and schedule automated emails that are going to go out to prospects and remind you when you need to call them. And they set up these sequences that are super helpful. One could argue, we'll see, you could just set up a whole bunch of sequences and a salesperson never even needs to touch. A marketing could essentially set them up, and you're going to get an email on day one, and then 3 days later, you're going to get one that's slightly different. We can have it tailored if we know that you are a consultant or a VP of marketing or whatever it is. The reality is people see through those really quickly. And the challenge for the salesperson, and why it's important to have a salesperson there, is they really act as a curator of information that, based on what research they've done about a particular prospect and their company and their market, what type of information could be useful and relevant to them, that they're starting to develop a relationship. So while the tool itself on the surface might look like, hey, who needs a salesperson? I can get rid of my SDR team. Actually, it's not true at all. The tool helps facilitate curating the information more effectively and over a period of time, but it doesn't eliminate the need for a human, an educated, knowledgeable human to go in and use the tool.
Right. I think that where the technology has been applied so far is primarily at opening a door, right? Establishing contact.
Yes.
And it's fantastic for that. I mean, it's enabling levels of productivity, perhaps, that we haven't seen before. But once you've got that contact, once you've got somebody that perhaps even you've qualified, then there's the whole, sort of little point of the rest of the sales cycle, the real part of the sales cycle, their buying process that still needs to take place. And I heard Scott Abro, one of the co-founders of Topo, talk about this at their conference, about how there's always going to be this area that's reserved, part of the sales process that's reserved for what he called the uniquely human sales skills that, at least from where we stand today, we don't think that machines are going to be able to replace.
Yeah, and there are some uniquely human. If machines are going to replace these uniquely human skills, Andy, it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
It's going to be a while. Like, I don't see it. It's going to be a while before. It's funny. I was scheduling lunch with a friend, and she uses this
virtual assistant.
A virtual assistant, and it's a combination of human and machine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating. And it's challenging to even schedule, hey, do you want to have lunch on Wednesday, and where do you want to go? Imagine all the nuances in a sales conversation and what that dance and interaction looks like. If machines are going to do it, we're a long way away.
Yeah, what we'd have to do is we have to be doing biometric scanning at the same time the machine is, at the same time it's posing questions to the buyer. Unless, of course, at that point it's just machine-to-machine buying, and people are completely disintermediated from the process. But yeah, I think that's not going to be something you and I are going to have to concern ourselves with. Certainly, coming generations may have to figure out what the impact is. But for the foreseeable future, to me, it's sort of like the whole idea that back in the 70s, everybody said flying cars are just around the corner. And we're not quite there yet.
No, we're still having trouble with self-driving cars.
Yeah, it doesn't mean the flying cars aren't coming, and that'd be kind of cool, but I don't think we're quite there yet. So,
no, not quite there yet.
So for me, taking this phrase, this uniquely human sales skills, I think it's not the correct phrasing. I mean, as much admiration as I have for the guys at Topo, I mean, to me, I would focus more on uniquely human sales behaviors, because to me, the behaviors, it's not about proficiency. As before you have proficiency, you have to practice the behavior.
Andy, maybe let the audience know how you define a behavior versus a skill.
Yeah, behavior, again, it's that fundamental thing that you're practicing that, for instance, let's take responsiveness. And me, this is the key.
This is a big one.
This is the key, right? I'm a believer that this is a keystone habit, that if you practice responsiveness, is the way I describe it in my books and writings, if you mastered that, the ripple effect throughout your entire sales success and sales performance would be immense. Okay, well, responsiveness is not a skill. It's a practice. It's something you do. It's a habit. It's sort of like waking up early during the day. I mean, that's not a skill. That's a behavior. I think when you're talking with customers, learning how to be present, right? How to be really focused in a way that is meaningful, that makes it all about them as opposed to you. That's a habit. It's not necessarily a skill. It doesn't mean that's not something you can't get better at, but fundamentally it's a mindset versus skill.
Do you use behavior and habit interchangeably?
I do.
Okay.
And I throw mindset in there as well. So it doesn't mean that at perhaps in some level there's proficiency, and by proficiency may not be the right term, because could you become more responsive? Yeah, I think that's part of developing a better habit. Just like being on time. Timeliness, is that a skill or a behavior? I mean, it's a behavior. And the thing about behaviors is we have ultimate control over our behaviors. Listening, learning how to listen, active listening. Is that a skill or is that a behavior? Well, I think it starts with being a behavior.
And then you become more skilled at it over time.
And then you can become more skilled at it over time. But you have to adopt that behavior. People talk about, the art of the follow-up. And for me, it's like, well, you actually have to follow up before you can practice the art. Right?
Yeah, you actually just have to get out there and do it first.
You actually have to get out there and do it first.
Get out there and do it, and then get better at it.
Right. And you could say that same thing true with just like, if you have call reluctance, right? If you're not going to get any better unless you have the discipline and the habit of actually making the calls. So you have to have that behavior first. You have to have that habit first, and then you can build on the skills. So I think that's the part that if you're a sales professional and saying, gosh, how do I maintain relevance as the world progresses? I'm a young person, a millennial, I'm beginning of my career, I'm looking forward 30, 40 years. Gosh, who could envision what the technologies could be like at that time? What can I do to best position myself to maintain relevance in a sales profession? And to me, it's master these fundamental behaviors, and you put yourself in a position to maintain your relevance to your buyers. Be responsive, listen without judgment, be present, create peak experiences, during your sales process, read, listen, and learn, continually improve your craft. Those are habits. Practicing empathy, that's a habit, it's a behavior.
That's going to be hard for a machine to do.
Being empathetic?
Yes.
No, didn't you see 2001, The Space Odyssey?
Yes, and I maintain my position and my opinion. Like, it's going to be hard for me to ever believe that a machine really can identify with how I'm feeling and my pain by virtue of the fact that it's a machine. And empathy is important in sales. The human-to-human connection, Andy, I think is until we get to the point, as you say, that it's a machine buying from a machine. If there's a human involved, there are very human behaviors and attributes that I believe are always going to be important. People still buy from people. And what are the things that help to engender trust and connection and will encourage a prospect to open up and share what's going on in a situation to give the best possible chance of a good outcome for both sides.
Right.
Because if a prospect doesn't open up and isn't honest with you, they don't trust you, or they're not sure what your motives are, or you're just going to try to sell me anything, it's going to be hard for you to really determine what does a great solution look like for this prospect, and is the solution that I'm selling the right one?
Exactly. And I think one way to sort of think about this topic is, and I hadn't really thought about this till you made your comment, is the problem that a lot of sales professionals have is they are too robotic. Right?
Yeah.
We're scripted, we're given a process, we have to execute like this. And they're not as mindful of these baseline behaviors, sales habits that have to be in place, regardless what sales methodology they're practicing or sales process they have. If they don't have these habits, then it's sort of all for naught. I mean, it's pushing the proverbial wet noodle up the hill.
And I think as managers, we're partially responsible for this robotic behavior. And the tools and our tool selection is partially responsible for this robotic behavior. We put in scripts, you need to follow this process, you need to make sure you get these points, and we don't perhaps do adequate training around what's behind the script and allowing enough time for practice. And again, some of it I believe that a salesperson should take on his or herself. But I think as a manager and a leader, the more that I can do to help a salesperson integrate and make personal the scripts and the process and the things that are mechanized just by virtue of the tool and wanting to be efficient and wanting consistency. Perhaps we missed something. I hadn't thought about it, but I completely agree that we do get too robotic. We're nervous. And I've seen sales reps nervous to stray from the script because this is what my manager said I need to follow. Mm-hmm. And then they do come across as robotic.
Yeah. So if you think about it from, like, let's say a sales training standpoint, my belief is I'd rather train people on these behaviors and less on skills. So I think we spend a lot of time training salespeople on skills, but not on the behaviors that are really end up informing the skills. Mm. So if I'm new in my career in sales, what do I want to focus on learning? What do I want to be reading about? Well, hey, I'd be reading about how can I improve these basic behaviors? How can I improve my level of empathy? How can my EQ? I'd be reading books about EQ in sales, like Colleen Stanley's written and others. I'd focus on responsiveness. Read Zero Time Selling and amp up your sales to learn about responsiveness and the value of storytelling. Right, so you get in the habit of leading with stories as opposed to and asking questions as opposed to always sort of pitching the whole time, right? Read a book about mindfulness, so you learn how to be present and focused and in the moment. Those are behaviors that I think that if you can integrate those into your day-to-day practice, have much bigger impact on your long-term success, short-term and long-term success, than how do I write the best subject line in an email?
Yeah, I still think that the skills are important. And I just see a lot of reps that this is their first job and they don't have the skills or the behaviors. So I think there's both of them are going to be important, but I believe that some of the skills, like your example, how do I write the best subject line email? More and more of that I'm seeing can get automated. Like yes. You can go look at and say, okay, here are the 40 subject lines that we've used, that people on the team have used in the last 30 days. These are the two that get the best responses. Okay, let me use these. Exactly. So there are shortcuts there. And maybe that's your point, is around the behaviors, you can't outsource that. No,
you can't. And your point is extremely well made. I mean, for a lot of these things, it's the teaching the skills. I think if you have the behaviors in place, the fact is that in most areas, outside, let's say, maybe of some of the inside sales development type functions, but even there to some degree, sales is really an apprenticeship. We wish that we had these manuals. There were definitive manuals that would teach us how to do things. Mm. But, all these methodologies, all these processes, they're just people's opinions. Right?
And there are people's opinions, and there's not a one size fits all.
And there's not a one size fits all. So, but I think what is one size fits all, to some degree, are these behaviors. You brought up one in an earlier episode we did. Actually, I think it was our previous episode about attention to detail. Mm. To me, that's a habit. You talked about punctuality. To me, that's attention to detail, punctuality. That falls into that category. That's a habit. Spelling, grammar, things that can make the difference between creating a good first impression or not. And again, you said that you talked with some of your reps in the past that this didn't think it was important. Well, that's been that way forever. The young reps, people new into the game, think, oh, yeah, someone will look past that. If there's enough value in the message. Not really. Not if they have a choice between you and somebody else, especially if you're selling a product where attention to detail is pretty important, as most certainly tech-based or tech-enabled products are, which increasingly is a huger part of our economy.
Yeah, the detail is important. When you're talking about spelling and grammar, I think about texting and how texting and chat and Twitter are becoming increasingly popular in terms of, or commonplace in terms of communication, even B2B communication. And the shortening of words and the lack of punctuation and the grammar even, it's really interesting to see how that plays out. It still bothers me when I see even a text message that's not punctuated properly, which I'm sure the young people in the crowd will say, "Okay, hello, old lady. I think
really.
You've expired. Your expiration date has passed." But I think it's just going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because what might be acceptable in a chat message is not acceptable in an email communication or written communication, and how we make sure that we keep those separate. Because again, it may be okay in chat, but it's not okay to have it in email.
Well, you just have to sort of extend the example. So, and this has always been the case. It's not pointing fingers at millennials or anybody younger. It's always been the case in sales. You might have somebody that's a little careless with spelling on an email or a letter or something back in the days when letters were sent. And they'd say, well, that's okay, the misspelling, that's no problem. But in the customer's mind, what they're saying is, okay, now I'm going to have to spend more time going through your proposal you gave me because I'm not sure the numbers are going to add up.
Correct. That's right.
Because, if you're willing to let this slip, what are you letting slip over here? And maybe that's just a level of stress I don't need at this point in time. I don't want to have to check your work. I want to make sure maybe somebody in accounting will add up the numbers, make sure they all add up. But, I want to make sure that they're good. And I don't trust you to do that because you've just been sloppy in all your communications to me. And this is not an apocryphal tale. This has happened. I've seen it on numerous occasions over the course of my career, where the expectations that sales reps have set ended up losing us an opportunity or putting us in jeopardy, let's say. I've had to go in and correct situations. I actually had to move new people onto accounts and take people off because they just wouldn't pay that level of attention to detail. And it was really important to the client.
I think also, Andy, sometimes like you see something's sloppy and as you were describing, well, I don't really have time, nor do I want to go and check their work around the numbers. Some of that can be conscious, and a prospect may think that and be very aware that something may not add up. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's subconscious, and they're not even aware of it, and they just don't move forward because something doesn't feel right that they may not even be able to put their finger on. So it can be conscious or unconscious. Either way, it's negative.
Yeah. I think there's a word for that people call it precognitive perception. And so, they're forming these impressions before they're even aware that they have them. And it's based on little things like that. So, you're absolutely right. It's and I've seen that happen too. And we get that. Gosh, we have that in our own lives. We meet somebody and we're just something's not right.
Something's not right. Right.
And we can't put our finger on it. We can't describe it. But, may they reach out to us on social. They say, hey, let's get together. Let's do something. It's like, no, I don't think so, right? We've had that in the past with, we've met people and they would do something as couples, right? So they invite my wife and I somewhere. It's like, maybe
and then something's just not right.
Yeah, maybe you do it once and it's just like, you can't put your finger on it, but it's just not a match. But there's something that was done. And so attention to detail, one of those behaviors that's really, really critical. Another behavior, asking questions first as opposed to talking about yourself. That starts in sales when you get the first opportunity with the client, and instead of asking a question, you pitch. Here's my elevator pitch, right? We've gone so far on the elevator pitch. Everybody knows it. Well, since you know it, I've got to tell it, right? Since I know it, I'm just dying to tell it. But you really want to lead with questions. Well, that's a behavior. You can get better at the questions you ask and the types of questions you ask, but just from a habit standpoint, what's your habit in terms of how you interact with people?
Yeah, and I think on that one, I agree that that definitely starts with the behavior, and one becomes more skillful as time goes on, and more skillful at being able to sort of read between the lines with what a prospect or customer might be saying, and how to allow enough time in between an answer and give enough of a pause. I think there's a lot that also the skill, it starts with the behavior, and I think then one can become skillful over time.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I agree 100%. But you have to have the behavior first.
You have to have the behavior. I agree.
And so that's really what this episode has all been about is focus on behaviors. This is Andy telling you from my lengthy experience in the field, few years in the field, but also from experience of talking to hundreds of experts in the field and so on, as we've done on this show. That's really reinforced that belief, is that look at your behaviors. If things aren't going quite as well as you'd like, or you want to say, look, how do I take that next step up, right? How do I get even better? Is instead of looking at the skills from a proficiency standpoint, make sure that you've mastered the basic behaviors that you need to have as a salesperson. And I've written about many of these in my books, and I'll continue to write about them going forward, and we talk about them in the show. Your responsiveness, your curiosity, your persistence, your attention to detail, your leading with questions, your being present, being mindful, focusing on the customer, many more. I wish it was a short list, but it's not a short list. But pay attention to those. And if you do that, I said the ripple effect through the rest of your performance is really going to be very substantial.
Amen.
Amen. We're in church. Amen. Everybody say hallelujah to that. Yes. So I'll get off my soapbox for now, at least for this episode. Next Friday I can get back on
this episode. Next Friday, get back on.
See, this is the one episode a week where I get to do that. Otherwise, I'm
I know.
really interviewing. It's really, again, about my guests more than me. But this is our show. We get to
pontificate.
I was going to say preach, but yeah.
Okay. What? Either one. Either one.
Neither one is really good, quite honestly.
I know.
But pontificate sounds even worse in my mind.
It is. I think it is a bit worse.
We're having a conversation. We're engaging the audience. So, as always, we really appreciate you taking your time to listen to us today. And if you have a question about anything at all that's sales related, drop me a note. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, send it via LinkedIn. You could send me Twitter at 0timeselling, or email it to me at andy@zerotimeselling.com. And we'll be sure to talk about it on the air in one of our upcoming episodes. So, Bridget, as always, it's been fantastic to talk to you, and to the audience, fantastic to have you with us.
Have a great rest of the Friday, Andy.
All right, Bridget, talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the show. If you like what you heard and want to make sure you don't miss any upcoming episodes, please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher.com. For more information about today's guest, visit my website at andypaul.com.